Welcome to the Lead at the Top of Your Game podcast, where we equipped you to more effectively lead your seat at any employer, business, or industry in which you choose to play. Each week, we help you sharpen your leadership acumen by cracking open the playbooks of dynamic leaders who are doing big things in their professional endeavors. And now your host, leadership tactics and organizational development expert, Karen Farrell-Rhodes. Hello, my superstars. This is Karen. Welcome to another episode of the Lead at the Top of Your Game podcast. We have an absolutely tremendous guest with us today that I cannot wait to have a deeper conversation on how he approaches leadership. And his name is Pascal Yammine. And hopefully I didn't murder that. That's Pascal Yammine, who is the CEO of a company called Zilliant. And Zilliant is a tech company that enables other companies and corporations to manage the entire pricing lifecycle on a single platform so they can create better buy-in experiences and drive profitable growth. And if any of you have been in any company worth their weight in gold, you know how challenging pricing strategies are. And so this is a company that actually helps organizations with that. And before joining Zilliant, Pascal was the SVP and GM of Salesforce Revenue Cloud. And he led the product direction, go-to-market, and operations. And he has, over 20 years as a tech executive. And, I came from tech. My last big role before founding the company was 14 years at Microsoft. So I just absolutely eat up tech conversations. But we're so excited to hear some of Pascal's leadership insights today. So welcome to the show, Pascal.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen.
Awesome. Have you. Well, before we dive deep on our conversation, one thing we always love to know is a little bit more about our guests. So for just as much as you feel comfortable, can you give us just a sneak peek into your life outside of work?
Well, it's mostly behind me. So above you have my school, the past lives, and then my current life, which is my kids. I have 3 beautiful daughters and a wife, and they keep me very busy and happy.
Oh, they're so gorgeous. I'm sure they do. Nonstop, probably.
Yes.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you for sharing. And let's go ahead and move into kind of the meat of our conversation. I know I did not do Zilliant justice. So let me just, first of all, start out there and let you kind of categorize a little bit more, maybe one tick down, what Zilliant does, how does it support customers, and what impact that you try to kind of have in the market.
I think you did a great job.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I think you did a really great job. And as you said, pricing is complicated. It's a hot topic. You hear about it every day in the news, oftentimes in consumer pricing. We are focused on B2B pricing, but it's a hot topic for a reason. People don't understand it. It's like this. It's just kind of almost like this vacuum of a topic where it drives a lot of fear and anxiety for people because you can get it wrong and it has a big impact. You can get it wrong. You hear stories about companies who have gotten it wrong, how it's impacted their brand or their financials, and so there's a ton of fear. And what we hope to do at Zilliant is to help alleviate some of that fear, help to actually simplify the process, make it more scalable and accessible to companies who have not been able to invest in pricing the way some of the large enterprise companies have, by building it into a SaaS single product platform.
And this might be a big assumption of mine, but I'm assuming there's a lot of consultation that goes into that because the markets are so volatile and industries change at a nanosecond. So I'm sure this is an ongoing area of focus. From once they engage, or am I totally wrong?
No, it's actually 100% accurate, and it's a very heavy in the consultation, and that's been the space. And I think that it will continue to be because there's a lot of expertise, and that's where the challenge is and the opportunity as well. Not everybody can afford that consultation. So what we're looking at is, taking the common best practices that the industries that we focus on. We focus in manufacturers and distributors primarily. Say, here's what the best practices are. Here's how we can democratize what we've learned through all the consultation, because not everybody can afford the consultation. So just making it a little bit more accessible, not to get rid of the consultation, but to make it less required, I guess is one way to think about it.
Very interesting. Now, do you all just focus on the U.S. markets or global markets?
No, we are global. We're about 60% in the U.S. and majority of the rest across Europe. Very heavy in manufacturing and distribution. industries. And so we'll look at in manufacturing and distribution sectors. There's a ton of opportunity across the world. And most of our customers are large enterprises. So they may be headquartered in the US, but they're global and across the world, including Asia. We are physically, our employee base is mostly in the US and in Europe, but we do have contractors around the world as well.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So I'm just curious, Pascal, what are some of the top trends you're seeing right now in as companies are, tackling their pricing challenges? What are some of the top of mind things for, I'll just say the C-suite and some of the companies that you're, partnering with?
Well, I think you mentioned it earlier, introduction. That's why I said you did a great job. Why is pricing so important? It drives not only, it drives margin as a really core part of what pricing has historically been tied to, but it also drives growth. Pricing, if done well, has ability to drive and give our customers the ability to be more strategic in thinking about how they can grow their revenues and also maintain margins and have that agility to do that. And that agility is really critical. If you look around, the climate we have around the world, whether it be environmental, whether it be bird flu with eggs, whether it be different conflicts in Europe, those have an impact on pricing and the cost of the goods and supplies and tariffs that we just say with tariffs. So companies need to have the agility to adapt, and they can't wait 6 months or a year to do that. So giving them that ability and to adapt quickly and adjust and be strategic in doing so, not reactive, is our core focus.
Interesting. And I'm also curious, Pascal, what are one of the biggest either myth or what I'll call areas of quicksand that companies either think or face as they think about pricing strategies?
AI is a topic of
It's so
the
hot right
year.
now.
It is pricing optimization has been using AI for a long time. And obviously, there's different terms of AI. I think number one, I would say, is you need to be a data scientist to use pricing. No, I mean there is some really complex, sophisticated pricing algorithms tied to that AI enables, and we've been using for 25 years. But that's what we do. Our customers don't need to be those experts. That's the idea, of course. They don't need to go there, and you typically see companies go from 0 to 100, and that level of complexity is, I think, what causes some fear and almost the feeling that it's not achievable. I tell you, we can't do that. Therefore, we can't take advantage of pricing. Pricing is so much more than the AI and the mathematical part of pricing. There's a ton of social elements there.
Wow. Let me switch to kind of your approaches on leadership, because one of the things we try to do in the podcast is to, provide our listeners at least one or two tidbits that they can kind of think about or lessons to kind of resonate on later. And so I'm curious about kind of your approach to leadership leading up Zilliant, because I know it's a very dynamic global company. How do you stay sane? And what is your approach to rallying the masses behind the vision of the company?
It's a really common question, but a really hard question, because I think everybody has this preconceived notion of what it means to be a CEO. And this is my first role as a CEO. I mean, you mentioned Salesforce, a general manager. It's similar, but not the same, right? So
Right.
I think we all understand that.
Yeah.
And I think number one for me was be myself, not try to be the CEO. Mark Benioff is a very
Love
great
it.
CEO at
Yeah.
Salesforce. I can't be Mark. I'm not Mark. So
Right.
I not try to pretend to be Mark. Doesn't mean I can't learn from him. And so bringing the learnings that I learned from him and from Salesforce and my previous experiences to the conversation, but not try to be somebody I'm not. That's number one. And Karen, I don't know, it seems like a simple one, but I think it is the most important thing I remind myself all the time. I have heard the feedback. Hey, you need to be more emotional, maybe more provocative. You need to be more of a marketer. That's not me. That's not my background. And so I have that tendency to hear the feedback and say, well, let me think about it and get tempted. I have to remind myself, it doesn't mean that those aren't real feedback. It just means that I need to surround myself with a team. And so if I have a certain style, it means I may need to look for my leadership team to make up for the other styles. And so my specific style is very engaging. I'm very operationally focused, and I'm very focused on the people. I think one of the it's 15 seconds for a background on me is hard because I've gone through quite a lot of turns in my career. But it started back in school when I got a master's at University of Illinois. And my focus was on how technology impacts and can be used to make people and teams more efficient. And that's been the one common theme throughout my entire career is technology impacting how organizations work and people behave. And so I'm really focused on the people part of the business, which means I need to have other people focus on the other parts. And for me, the style is knowing where I'm good and making sure I have the right balance of people to bring the company what the company needs to be successful.
I think that's the magic bullet, though, Pascal, because if you focus on the people, that is kind of golden to help build trust, to kind of weave the red thread around the mission, vision, and strategy of the company. And the fact that you have made that one of your top priorities will buy you a lot of air cover, in my experience. And I'm all about, I'm in the whole strategic HR and infrastructure, workforce infrastructure space. And so, focus on the people is huge, huge for organizational success.
Especially in today's world. Yes.
Okay, definitely.
Yeah.
You mentioned Mark Benioff, and he's one of my faves as well. I'm just curious if there was a lesson or two that, or observation of him that you've always kind of kept in your hip pocket as you moved to CEO of Zilliant.
I've learned a lot from my time at Salesforce, from Mark, and from a lot of people who, over 14 years at Salesforce, I've evolved in the many roles across the time. One of the things that I usually think about when I think about Mark and what I learned was his willingness to be wrong. And in some of your research, you talk about strategic, courageous agility. I kind of think of it in that way. I have seen him over and over be willing to change course, even though the course that we're on is a course he really advocated strongly for, once he realized, hey, we're not seeing the results. And I think that's hard. It's really hard for people to do because it's like this commitment they've made. They stood for a course. And I've seen him do that, and I've seen him do it so openly and kind of make it not only something for him to do, but make it okay for us to do it as well. So as in leadership roles at Salesforce, giving me the kind of courage to have that type of agility as well in my thought process and in my choices. And it's needed in a business where you change so much. And so that would be the number one I would share.
Very valuable, very insightful. And in today's world, another passion of mine is around the whole governance realm as well. And, in today's world, we're doing a lot of mergers and acquisitions. I
Yeah.
mean, that's still kind of hot right now. And I'm just curious, because you've experienced that, what is some leadership advice that you have for our listeners when they are involved in or facing some type of a merger acquisition? How do you meld the two different cultures and of the two organizations into one pretty quickly while you're building the plane and flying it at the same time?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you said you come from the HR practicing side, and
Yeah.
there's technical synergies and integration. There's operational integration. There's customers and go-to-market integrations. But I think overall, the hardest is the people side, especially when you have a fairly significant acquisition. If it's really small, it's kind of easy, just make the change and it is this. But when you see a sizable one, you're taking two companies, oftentimes they're two different cultures. I think it's probably number one, the hardest, and number two, the most underestimated
Yeah.
area. And you see it in the terms of the results where people don't stick around, or people have that friction, and you don't get the benefits and the synergies of the acquisitions that you'd hope for in the business plan because of that resistance and the lack of collaboration between the teams. I will almost always care and go to your area of practice because of my background. I almost prioritize the people side, organizational, cultural side as the biggest area of focus, and also probably the most underestimated or uninvested in, with the least investment, unfortunately. So that's usually going to be my answer.
I love that answer.
Yeah.
I love that answer. And I'll even share because, board advisory has been an additional offering of our firm as well. And so many, corporate boards, corporate and private boards actually are expanding the scope of their, compensation committees, or creating a separate talent committee, even at the board level, because they want to drive more of the oversight for people and cultures and what have they, want to work with their CEOs and the C-suite in doing that. So if people aren't really resonating with how important the people and culture side are, they're missing out.
I agree. I mean, and Zilliant was bought by a private equity firm out of Chicago, Madison Dearborn Partners. They're the ones who brought me to Zilliant, and I think that's one of the important things that they, as a firm, have demonstrated to me that they care as well. And I think that was, I would say, kind of a surprise. It was a surprise. You hear all these things about private equity firms and how boards work and how they run their boards.
Right.
I think one of the things I've really been excited about was having our private equity firm, our sponsors, as well as our independent board members care about the talent, care about the culture employee experience. And it is a topic in every board.
Yes.
Not maybe not as much of a governance topic because
Right. But to
in our
touch
world,
base to see what's going on.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And I'm curious, how do you measure success and failure in your role as a CEO? Because you have a lot on your shoulders and pulled in many different directions. How do you keep the balls juggling and how do you measure success and failure?
Yeah, it's hard. There's the obvious financial indicators that are the company level one. But I will go back to the answer I said I will always give you, which is people. Um,
Love it.
if you look at the team at Zilliant, a lot of those people are people who I've brought from my experience in the past, people I've worked with or have worked with through or been referred to me through them. And seeing the leadership that comes, seeing the types of diverse people who have come to Zilliant, seeing them promoted. We just had a person who joined us. He worked at Salesforce and I knew him from Salesforce and he left to another job and seeing him be able to get a better job. I love it. I love it because it
Wow.
means that he gained something as a part of being here. So it's seeing the progression of people in general,
Yeah.
especially a leadership team develop, I think is the number one thing that I look at outside of the core financials. Of course, everybody looks at those. And it's hard when we go through a transformation. I'm sure you have plenty of great stories about companies that are going through a transformation.
Yeah.
We are Resilient are changing our business significantly.
I can imagine. And, one of the things that is a hot topic in business news and articles is all about, workplace well-being. And so I'm just curious, how do you advise like your C-suite team on things like how not to spread themselves too thin and where to focus on? How do you, I know it's always busy, that's never going to be taken out of there, but how do you help them approach at least a work-life prioritization?
Yeah, it's love your feedback on that question. So hopefully you'll give me your thoughts. But to me,
Mm.
it's got to be by example. And I would say having kids has definitely made a change in my life. I mean,
I
I
bet.
have three girls, twins who are just turned 12 last week,
Oh,
um and a
congratulations.
10-year-old. Just like that change, it forces me to like, hey, I need to take time. So if I go on vacation and leave work, like don't answer my phone calls. It sets an example. If I have to say I need a day off, I need a mental health day, whatever it is. So just number one, leading by example, because if you're working, and I used to work, and I still work a lot, just to be clear,
I
but
know you
um,
do.
being specific on like just take time away, covering for people when they go on vacation, giving them this, to try not to call them as best as possible. I think is important to set that example internally so that other people feel safe doing it. It's hard because we are global, we are remote first. I know a lot of companies are going back to the office. We are remote first as a company,
Nice.
and it's harder to do that. And I think that mental health and like workplace safety in terms of like the mental safety and is important. And I'm always looking for different ways to encourage that behavior and different ways to show that behavior. So I'm all love any feedback you have and what you've seen work well.
Wow. It's like it's a lot. It depends upon the person too, because how one person defines what is well-being for them is different for another individual. So one of the things we always advise is to make sure leaders treat each of their staff as a person of one to try to better understand and then try to see where the trends lie and see what things that you can implement at a company-wide level versus what you can offer one-on-one. There's no perfect answer. I'm sure you know because you're probably battling it too every day. But it's all about having that conversation and helping those who are finding that they're struggling in one area or another and trying to find out, is there a great win-win solution for them both?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's a great point, Karen. I mean, I have kids. Not all of my leadership team has children at home, or maybe they have children who are away from home and they're already grown. And so, trying to build a model that is tied to my situation won't work for everybody. And also, time zones. We have what
Yeah.
we have on a monthly basis. We call it Zilliant Zen Days. So
Oh, I love this
once a
marketing
month,
branding.
it's half a day of like no meetings, of no work, take time, mental health time. But one of the we're globally distributed, and so trying to create it as like always the same day at the same time is really hard because
Yeah,
you know if it's Friday my afternoon, that might be morning in people in West Coast, it might be
that's right.
evening in Europe.
That's
So
right.
we try to create some flexibility in those programs, not to make it all tied to me or to where our headquarters is, but Yeah, not everybody has the same situation as me. I think that's good. That's a good point here.
No, you're so right, and I'll even say we're, remote first as well, even though we have offices in Atlanta. But even in my direct team, we have folks from all over the world, and, we rotate staff meetings. There's always gonna be a time zone that gets the short end of
Yeah,
the stick, whether it's, California, Atlanta, Tokyo, or the UK, somebody's gonna get the end of
yeah,
the stick. So we rotate so that it's not bad for one group all the time.
yeah,
But, those are the types of things that make sense and you can do that in your business. It's definitely something to consider.
yeah.
I had another CEO on a previous podcast who talked about how decisions at his level is a mix of looking at data, but then, your gut feel and, you're having to move forward no matter what. So I'm just curious for you, and how much we're both technology loves, but how much does data and facts weigh with you versus your gut feel?
That's a really good question. I think especially in a space that like we're in where we're trying to change it,
Yeah,
data from the past is useful, informative, but not an indication of where we want to be in the queue because we are
very
intentionally
true.
changing it. So it's a balance of learning from the data that we have, but not ignoring it, but at the same time not getting too bogged down with it. And I think that I would say it is probably 50-50 at this point, data and gut, maybe 40% data, 60% gut because of what I just said. And I think it's tough.
It's very tough. I know from my end it is because you want to be informed, but then sometimes, you have
Yeah.
that experience and you're thinking, gosh, if I had to, I'm not a betting woman, but I had to bet three pennies, I think we need to really go this way.
Yeah. And gut is not just my gut. I mean, I have a great
Yeah,
leadership
the
team
team.
who have great accomplishments in their own ways, and the data we look at collectively, and then I would expect, and I look and I appreciate and respect their gut in terms of what they think as well. So
Yeah.
it's an informed gut instant.
I love it. I love it. Well, Pascal, we're about to wrap in on time, but before we ask you our signature question that we always love to ask our guests, is there any last piece of advice or a nugget that you want to leave with our listeners?
Well, I think just leading, you kind of continuing that last point, you have to be okay with failing and making mistakes. I know there's a lot of things. If I go back and say, well, 3 years ago, I made this decision. I hired this person, or I made this, or whatever it is. You can always look backwards and say, I wish I didn't make that. You learn from those failures, and that kind of gives you the ability and the okay to kind of go with your gut a little bit more than you would normally. And I think more often than not, it's when I didn't go with my gut and I was too bogged down in data, that's when I regretted it. So being okay with failure is probably one of the most important things I've learned in the last couple of years.
All right, listeners, you've heard it from Pascal. Take it to heart. Well, listeners, our signature question comes from the research that we did on high performing leaders and organizations around the world, and is all about leadership execution. And Pascal was so kind to share that out of the 7 buckets of leadership execution tactics, the one that kind of resonated with him, as you all know, all 7 are equally as important and you use them at different times. But the one that really resonated with him was leading with a drive for results. And for my newer listeners out there, drive for results is exactly what it sounds like. It's all about being very focused and tenacious about making sure your end goal is achieved, even if you have to pivot along the way. So, curious minds would love to know, Pascal, why leading with a drive for results really resonated with you.
It's hard to choose. As you said, they're all equally important and it can go and have this debate for a long time. So I had to
Yeah,
pick one and you forced me to pick one. And that's the
I
one I picked.
did. Guilty
Uh,
as charged.
Here's my quick version. Number one starts with results. You have to know what you're trying to accomplish, and that's
Right.
why I like it. So the first is, are we aligned on what success is, what problem we're trying to solve, how we want to define it? And so one of the main reasons I ended up choosing that one is because it forces you to have a definition of results. So what are the results you're driving towards?
Yeah.
Once you have a common understanding of what success is, what a win is, what the problem you're trying to solve is, whatever that is, then it's just focusing. There's so much distraction. Having that
Yeah.
focus and getting to the outcome, it's a hard thing to do in this world where there's just a ton of noise coming in. So those are the 2 reasons for it. Having a clear definition of results, and then obviously the focus, getting rid of the noise so that you can accomplish it as a team.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective on that. And as you know, we're going to have a ton of information about you in our show notes, your bio links and what have you. But before we let you go, I want to give you a little airtime to share a couple of things. I'd love for you to share where audience members can find out more about you and Zilliant. And then also, if you can repeat who are the ideal companies that you work with so that folks will know if your services are something that they should, definitely take a second look at.
Web presence, LinkedIn, just go to zilliant.com. We do have our customer event in April in Austin
Oh,
called Mindshare. We just shared on LinkedIn a couple days ago. We have Jeffrey Moore speaking as our keynote speaker.
oh,
It'll be
nice.
a really great event. So a lot of opportunity to meet part of the team as well as other customers who are tackling the problems. In terms of our companies and our ideal customers, I mentioned before, if you're manufacturing anything, and distribution companies, food distribution, auto parts distribution are a good example. Those are the companies that we are primarily focused on. And again, across all sizes and all geos. We have a lot of great examples, and anybody who joins us in Austin at Mindshare could see some customers who have shared their stories of how they leverage Zilliant to deliver profitable growth. And we'd love to talk to anybody.
Sounds good. Well, it sounds like, listeners, if this is the space you're interested in, you might want to take a second look at Mindshare coming up and attending that. That can give you a bit of more of a preview of the impact that Zilliant can help your organization make. And you can also follow them on LinkedIn. As we all know, we kind of live there when we need to learn more about people and companies. So definitely do that. Well, thank you so much, Pascal, for the gift of your time and sharing quite a few of your insights with our listeners.
Thank you, Karen.
Awesome. And thank you too, listeners, for the gift of your time as well, because as we always like to say, we know that there's literally millions of other podcasts you can be listening to, and we do not take your patronage lightly. All that we ask is just you please like and subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform of choice. And be sure to share the podcast with just one friend, because by doing so, it'll help us all to better lead at the top of our games. Thanks so much, and see you next week. And that's our show for today. Thank you for listening to the Lead at the Top of Your Game podcast, where we help you lead your seat at any employer, business, or industry in which you choose to play. You can check out the show notes, additional episodes, bonus resources, and also submit guest recommendations on our website at leadyourgamepodcast.com. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn by searching for the name Karen Rhodes, with Karen being spelled Karan. And if you like the show, the greatest gift you can give would be to subscribe and leave a rating on your podcast platform of choice. This podcast has been a production of Shockingly Different Leadership, a global consultancy which helps organizations execute their people, talent development, and organizational effectiveness initiatives on an on-demand project or contract basis. Huge thanks to our production and editing team for a job well done. Goodbye for now.